Week 1, Context and Barriers. Barriers for learning and learning styles are a myth. Challenges to learning. Now that we've looked at the contexts in which learning happens, let's think about the way a learner shows up to that learning space. All of us are unique human beings with our own identities and our own rich collection of lived experiences that we bring with us to this learning space. Some of what we bring to the learning isn't helping us to learn, though. In this course and throughout our CERT program, a barrier to learning refers to anything that makes learning more difficult for the learner. Barriers are not about individual ability or effort. Everyone is capable. But there are barriers in life that impact how we show up to that classroom, how we show up to that staff workshop, how we show up to that online course. In the next activity, you'll be asked to share what barriers to learning you have experienced, so start thinking about that. Don't worry, I'll only ask you to share what you feel comfortable sharing with us. I'll share with you a story about barriers that my dad lived with when I was younger. But first, let's look at different kinds of barriers and some examples. Kinds of barriers. Access and technology barriers. These are barriers related to whether learners can physically or digitally access the learning experience. Things like no transportation to campus, inaccessible walkways, entrances, or pathways to the classroom, limited or unreliable internet access, expensive tools and software, learning platforms that they can't navigate. Then there's life barriers. These are barriers related to work, health, and family responsibilities, such as caretaking responsibilities, work schedules, long commutes, multiple jobs, medical injuries or conditions. Then there's social barriers. Social barriers are often invisible, but they can shape who feels welcome and safe enough to engage in learning. There's belongingness uncertainty. Belongingness uncertainty happens when students feel like they don't belong in a space. Stereotype threat. When students feel the pressure not to confirm a negative stereotype, it can make learning more stressful and harder to concentrate. This pressure is about expectations placed on them, not their actual ability. And there's so many more. There's so many more kinds of barriers that impact learning. Here are a few more kinds: language barriers, cultural differences, assumptions about prior knowledge, neurodiversity, mental health. A story about Katie's dad. My dad had brain surgery when I was in my first year of high school that left him blind on his right side and unable to read. He had gotten his PhD from Stanford and had been an electrical engineering professor at West Point, and his loss of ability was extremely life-altering for him, to say the least. It was impactful for me, too. As I helped my dad navigate the world as a newly disabled person, I quickly became aware of how many barriers exist for visually impaired people. He could no longer access his computer on his own. He could no longer drive. I remember reading him the captions anytime movie dialogue switched to a language other than English. He needed help doing normal everyday things like using the microwave, recognizing faces, and anything involving reading. The environment hadn't changed, but my dad's abilities had, and suddenly all these barriers started getting in his way. And that's when I realized that barriers are often invisible to those who do not experience them. Most of the time, we don't even realize the barriers that make others feel uncomfortable and unwelcome in the spaces around us. As instructional designers, what can we do about barriers that our learners are experiencing? We'll explore this together on the next page, and we'll share about the kinds of barriers we've experienced as learners. A note on learning styles and barriers. Learning styles are a myth. You may have heard people describe themselves as a visual learner or an auditory learner. While this idea is popular, research does not support learning styles as fixed categories that determine whether someone can learn. Learning styles are a myth. That said, poorly designed, single-format content can still create barriers that can be helped with thoughtful instructional design. I tell you this because I don't want the term learning style coming up in our discussions about barriers. Again, learning styles are a myth.